Hi, and welcome to Starry Woods AstroCast, a podcast all about studying and learning astrology, relating with the cycles and stars in a deeper, more enchanted way, and fun astrological ideas and techniques. I'm your host, Tony of the Woods, and this is our second episode. Recording began at about 1:07 p.m. in Terre Haute, Indiana, on my side. And this is the next in a series of chats I'm having with fellow students of astrology and fellow astrologers about their learning and learning path and tips and tricks that they can share with us. I'm excited to welcome Milo, my friend and fellow student astrologer, to the show. Hey, Milo.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here on the burgeoning pod.
Excited to have you. Yeah. Why don't we just jump right in and could you tell everyone just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name's Milo Anderson Offerein, and right now I'm living in Edmonton, Alberta. I just moved here, 4 months ago, at the beginning of November, but I'm really connecting into some of the local stuff, which I'm excited about. For example, I have already hopped into kind of a co-organizer role in the local astrology group, which is like super fun. One of them. Yeah, and I guess if I was going to sum up kind of my work in the world and what I do, I'd say the thing that really ties it all together is like just trying to be an agent of care in the world. My educational background's in social work, and so I've worked in social work a bunch in the past, especially like serving queer and trans communities. And I'm going back to grad school in just a couple of months to be able to start private practice. So that's super exciting. And yeah, I'm an astrologer with a focus on, I love doing synastry, especially like polyamorous synastry. That's maybe like my nerdy passion, although I love all of it. And I am also a forest therapy guide.
Cool. Yeah, a lot that I'd like to come back to at some point. Cool. Why don't you just tell us a little
yeah,
more
did you want me to tell you my placements, my rising sign? Maybe it was obvious from what I was saying, but I'm a Cancer. I'm a Cancer rising with the moon in Libra in the 4th house.
Awesome. Yeah, Cancer rising here as well. So awesome. Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about what got you into astrology, like how you caught the bug or how you were hooked in?
Sure. It's funny, I was thinking about this story last night, and I was like, oh, it kind of goes pretty far back. I mean, how I grew up, astrology was like not really allowed in my more like fundamentalist Christian household, but I was always kind of drawn to like fortune cookie sayings and like, you know, the little horoscopes that would be on the coffee news and things like that. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I remember telling a friend, like, oh, I've got to grab the coffee news because it has my favorite horoscopes. And they were like, what are you talking about? You don't read Chani Nicholas or like Galactic Bunny or something? Like your favorite horoscope is coffee news? And I was like, wow, wait, are there good horoscopes out there? And so I, especially living in queer communities in Vancouver, there's a lot of kind of like astrology fans. And even a few of my friends were astrologers. And I became, a fan of Chani and some of the other like queer astrological writers that were on the kind of like mid 2000s internet. But I never was able to really dive into it because I didn't have my birth time. And it's something that I knew enough about astrology to know you had to have the exact time or it didn't totally work. And I remember even because I was pregnant as a teenager and I had my first kid on my 18th birthday. Our sons are conjunct, so that's always interesting. But I remember asking the nurse, like, you know, what was the time that the baby was born? And she was like 5 o'clock. And I was like, but was it exactly 5 o'clock? And she was like, oh, it was 5:01, right? And so I knew enough about it to know it had to be exact. But anytime I asked my mom, love you, mom, hi, she would be like, 1 p.m. or 3 p.m. Or, she would kind of go back and forth in these early afternoon hours. And so I was all this time developing like a connection to pagan community and reclaiming witchcraft. Well, can't say witchcraft right now. Reclaiming witchcraft is a kind of community I was connected to. And I remember looking at these between 1 and 3 p.m. times and thinking, okay, well, I'm definitely not an Aries rising. I just kind of did this subjectively. And so I'd ask people, do you think I'm Pisces rising or do you think I'm Taurus rising? Like, what do you think? And everyone would say, you're definitely Taurus. And I was like, I don't think so. I think I'm Pisces. I just was totally subjectively trying to figure out my rising sign because I didn't really know there was any kind of rectification that one could do in a more serious manner. But anyway, in 2020, which is a year that I think a lot of people became a lot more serious about astrology, that in the people I've been meeting, I was given a birthday gift from my partner, which was like the Chani book, You Were Born for This, and then also like a bundle of like all of Chani's webinars. And so I think she has these 3 webinars: your moon, your money, and your life. Oh no, your moon, your money, your love.
Okay.
Anyway, they were great. And they really kind of gave me the like basics of understanding aspects, houses, signs, planets. And I had learned a lot of that through osmosis already, but I knew I was like, okay, I need to get this birth time thing like totally solved, or else I can't really dive in. And for whatever reason, when I talked to my mom this time, she said 6:45. And I was like, what? 6:45? This is like so much more specific than usual. And I just had the feeling like, that's got to be right. And so I ordered it from the hospital. It came back, it said 6:35 on my records. And so that was pretty accurate. And yeah, and from there, my partner saw I was getting into astrology. She booked me a reading with a lovely astrologer named Michael J. Morris, who I had first heard their work when they did an episode on the Astrology podcast, which is called Transgender Experiences in Astrology. And so that reading was lovely. It really connected me to my Cancer rising birth chart, and kind of the rest is history. I just dove right in. And I think the interesting thing about how I had thought of myself for all those years as a Pisces rising is I actually do have a Pisces midheaven. So maybe we can give myself some points there.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm taking notes too, so we can put some links to various things like the books you mentioned and the podcasts you're talking about, because I think people might want to listen to those. I don't think I've heard that episode of the Astrology podcast, so I'll have to search it out myself. It sounds really interesting.
Oh yeah, Michael's an amazing astrologer, so definitely check out all their stuff.
Absolutely. And I can relate to the birth time thing, because that's one thing that kept me a little back from astrology, just because my mom was pretty consistent, but it just didn't feel exact. And it could be a few different rising signs, and the moon was changing positions that day. So I think that held me back too. So I can definitely relate with that, and it's great that you got that time. Cool. Yeah, again, some more things that I'd like to expand on a little further on too.
Sure.
Also, something else for me too, I have a lot of fortune in Pisces, so I always kind of felt more Piscean, even though I didn't have that Pisces connection. So it's interesting how sometimes there's still a connection there. Like I thought I had a Pisces moon for a while, and the Aries moon just didn't make sense to me. But now as I've grown and like experienced more life, it makes a lot more sense. And even looking back, but also you mentioned like having that wrong conception, not wrong, but a different conception of what your chart was at a certain time before it was like specified to be something different in the future. I kind of think there is something kind of divinatory about that, kind of like the Jeffrey Cornelius, like the chart that you get is the chart that you kind of need in some way at that time. So in the technical side of astrology, it's not correct, but maybe there is some sort of, I don't know, medicine or learning to be had that's what you thought your chart was for a while. Something to think about at least.
Totally. I'm curious about that. I've wondered it sometimes when, I'm just kind of in the beginning stages of learning horary astrology, which is the kind of astrology where you take the chart of the moment that you ask a question and look at it kind of like a tarot spread to answer your specific question right now. And I've done horaries for people, and mostly, I must emphasize, I am quite technically proficient, so it's not like I'm blundering all over the place. But there was one time where I accidentally put AM instead of PM or something like that for a horary question. And so we read the horary for totally like a chart of 12 hours off. And then when I realized the change, I was like, oh, shoot, we should redo it for right now. But the first chart we were talking about was way more accurate to the situation. So I don't know. Maybe there was something about 12 hours earlier that really needed to come through, or maybe, we just really found something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can attest that you're very technically proficient. I had reading with you. It was great. And yeah, I think it's good for us to stick to our technique and get better and better, but also kind of let the strangeness come in as well. Just because, yeah, that chart was the wrong chart, but you found something significant in it in relation with your client, which is really great. So cool. Yeah. Liking where we're going so far. I think it's a good time to maybe readjust or to the next part, which is to talk about like the study of astrology. So we talked about like how you got in, but for you, what was the studying like, and is, I'm assuming it's an ongoing journey.
Of course.
So if you just describe like what studying is like for you, and like what like good moments in like your studying arc, and maybe lower moments, whatever you'd like to share about that.
Sure, yeah. For me, I have really taken a learn by doing approach. I don't remember the name of the sociologist that kind of coined this, but have you ever seen that graph where it shows like, when you're new at something, how confident you are, and then you start learning more and your confidence goes down. You're like, oh shoot, I actually don't know very much. And then finally by maybe a year later, your proficiency and confidence is back to where it was in the first couple of months. But I really kind of just jumped right in. Like, I remember by New Year's that first year, I was like, writing chart reports for people like as gifts, and not taking money for it. But I was just so like, I had my Channy book, I had Google, and I was like, I'm just going to look at people's charts and I'm just going to write some stuff. And I think I learned so much just through like being generous with my time and being interested in what I could learn by being able to actually like get feedback from people about what I was seeing in the chart. And so I think that paired with podcast listening, which is kind of funny. I was never a podcast person before the pandemic. I was always like very social. I remember when people were into podcasts, I was like, who has time to listen to podcasts? Like, I'm hardly ever alone. And then suddenly I was like, oh, look at this, an opportunity to listen to podcasts. And, it helped me get my chores done around the house or whatever. I just suddenly had the opportunity to really be listening in to, all the teaching that people have put out there. And then just trying to put it into practice right away. Like anything new that I learned, I would, talk to a friend of mine and be like, ooh, can I, look at your secondary progressed lunar phase or whatever I was curious about at the time. And luckily I have, friends who put up with me as I'm learning. But yeah, it wasn't until maybe almost a year and a half into studying everything I could through free resources that I actually decided to go, okay, here's some of the teachers that I really like. Maybe I'll plug into some of their courses or like more formal offerings that they're putting out there. So I'm just finishing up year one of Adam Ellenboss's Nightlight Astrology course. And I find him a really amazing teacher. And also, if when I have the mind for it, paying attention to how he teaches, because I think so much when you sit down with someone doing a chart reading is it's not about me being a brilliant genius, being able to see all this stuff. It's really about like, how do you communicate succinctly what you're seeing in a way that like someone with no background in the subject would be able to understand, right? And so I think I've learned a lot of that from him. One of his like pieces of advice is like, give the most simple explanation, right? And so if someone asks a question and you can see it through like, say, oh, you have Jupiter in the 6th house, or if you just can do that, then go with that, because you don't need to say, oh, well, the ruler of your fortune using fortune houses is this, and it's aspecting that. So, and even though that might be more technically precise in a way that satisfies us as the astrologer and makes us feel really like, ooh, that's so juicy, that's so interesting, to really like sit down across from someone, it's about how to like channel your galaxy brain into something understandable, right? And so that's really been why I think having one-on-one conversations with people about their charts has been like the most amazing part of learning for me.
Oh, that's really great insight. Yeah, kind of the jumping in feet first and kind of seeing how the astrology really is like in practice, like from an like a earlier stage. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like as I'm starting to do readings myself, I'm finding that too. Like each reading, I'm learning so much more than just like looking at charts and like doing book research, which is great. But yeah, that kind of interpersonal connection and like being able to talk with the person who is embodying the chart in a lot of ways, or like just embodying the chart in their life, gives a lot of like background and learnings of astrology that's hard to like condense into books or like even podcasts or courses. Yeah, that's awesome.
And like making friends with other astrologers or other students of astrology, like in the way that astrology is like a language, it is useful to have that kind of immersion process, right? And part of, if anyone's tried to learn a language, you'll know that if you have the idea, oh, I'll just wait until I'm fluent in the language to start trying to talk to anyone, because I want to skip over the embarrassing part where I sound like a 5-year-old, like you're never going to get there, right? You have to sound like a 5-year-old first who is like blundering through your grammar to kind of like be building the confidence and the fluency, right? Or, and there's lots of ways that I think perfectionism maybe can sabotage our learning process, around any skill, thinking, oh, once I'm at this, masterful proficiency of XYZ, then I'll finally, let anyone witness it. It's just like not how social creatures work, right?
Yeah, you're speaking to the choir in that sense. It's like I definitely have that tendency sometimes myself with learning, and it's so like I love that analogy with learning a language, because I mean they're both learning a foreign language and learning astrology are both ninth house things, so it makes sense that they would be connected. And clearly, astrology is a language of symbols that we're kind of putting together and translating in different ways to our clients and in our analysis. So yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, I studied linguistics and in college, so definitely aware of the various types of people who jump into foreign languages. You have the people who are jumping in feet first and making the mistakes quickly, but then they grow more quickly versus the people who kind of stick to the texts, and it can take a bit longer for sure. And no like denigrating of anyone's learning style. However, just being aware of when you're ready to jump in, just kind of take that leap, because it'll kind of advance you that much faster. So yeah, cool.
Yep, be embarrassing. That's my advice.
Yeah. Oh, and I just want to ask a little bit more about your course selection, because I myself haven't taken like a formal course in astrology yet. So how did you go about like choosing the courses that you've taken, or like pick a few maybe that were most like the biggest for you?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to specific techniques, like say for example, in addition to Adam Ellenboss's course, which is that's the only kind of catch-all big astrology schooling that I have put myself through so far. But I also I've taken Chris Brennan's zodiacal releasing course, and him and Patrick Watson also did a rectification course. Catherine Urban has a course called Chart Calculation for the Apocalypse, which helps you like learn how to do the math to do the chart by hand.
Yeah, cool.
And so kind of what drew me to those is because there are specific techniques I knew I wanted to practice. And say for the ZR course, I didn't, no offense to Mr. Brennan, love the work. But after listening to basically his whole podcast archive, I felt like that plus, the book, which I can take out from the library, some of the free like primary sources online, like being able to read Valence, you know, the PDF is out there. I kind of thought, I think I can graft through osmosis a lot of what he might be teaching in the longer Hellenistic course. But zodiacal releasing specifically, I knew that he had a lot of like innovation that he kind of added onto it from what's in the Valens text. You know, he kind of took that and ran with it. And so I was curious to learn like what are his more contemporary techniques that he's using alongside it. So I took that little portion. Yeah, I think that for me, I'm pretty thrifty. There's like a part of me that doesn't want to pay for webinars because I am like, oh, there's already more online content that I could ever listen to. But as I have, you know, come to really like grow attached to and respect the work of people online, you know, I want to support them and I want to learn what they have to say. And I like being able to get all of my information in a tidy little package. And, you know, so does that answer your question? That's kind of been driven me to kind of make the choices I have.
Yeah, I like some of the approaches you had to it, the sort of catch-all schooling versus specific schooling, which I like that distinction because, I mean, some people might decide that they do the catch-all learning on their own, but to learn in-depth techniques, like you're saying, like ZR, zodiacal releasing, or rectification, or electional astrology, or even more in-depth explorations of things that like Austin Coppock talking more deeply about the decans, or planetary combinations and things. And then those are more for isn't as much excuse me isn't as much available for free out there online. So it's kind of I see those as like ongoing learning as people become professionals or get deeper into their astrology. They might always kind of add on, just like in other careers you might do like ongoing training. In this case, we're kind of doing ongoing co-learning as some people study more deeply certain areas and then they're able to share them with others. So I like that. It's kind of a modular approach to you're taking control of your own learning and recognizing like where a course might fit in versus sort of assuming that you need to go in a specific track, which there are a few available. There's like some astrology university stuff, and a few people like Adam Ellenboss are offering several courses that kind of build on top of each other, like, or Kelly Surtees I've seen as well is another one, and Austin Coppock. So yeah, which, I mean, people can go that way, but some people like you and me, it seems like, kind of make their own path as they go. And take a course here and a course there and build the astrology practice from those. So.
Right. Well, and this is why it's so great to become friends with other people who are learning astrology, because you can compare notes and swap, right? Yeah. I have a friend who I have made online named Kyle Pierce. He's really lovely. Actually, he runs the astrology hotline. He's one of the hosts of that little pod. But he's a student of Austin Coppock, and he has a Discord server called 3 of Wands, which I think is open to anybody. And he is really interested in the decans. And so every time the sun passes through a decan, he'll have a little Discord chat where you can hop on and like, let's talk about, you know, the second decan of Pisces. And then we all just kind of get to chit chat about it. And that's the kind of learning that I probably wouldn't get anywhere else, right? Because I get to kind of just buddy up with a friend, listen to what, you know, he has to say about it, what he's learned about it. And then I can kind of just vibe with what I already know about Pisces and what kind of things I'm picking up from the images that he's, you know, describing and things like that. And I find that a really fun way to learn, like study group, book club kind of stuff.
Yeah, really like that, because sometimes it might be like, oh, okay, these are the few resources out there that I need to learn about decans, and then I guess I can't learn about decans until those become available. But really, that's not true. There's a lot out there. It's just more digging and research and application of things on your own, and then talking about those with friends. So yeah, I love that. I want to check that out, the 3 of Wands. I haven't seen that myself.
Oh, I'll invite you.
Yeah. And then a side note with decans as well, there's Andrew Watt is someone who does regular blog posts for each decan, I believe. And he does some like, I believe some mundane astrology connected to But he brings in the decan placements of all the main like significators, I guess, and talks about like Austin's some of the things that he's talking about and some of the titles he gives the different decans. But he brings in other interpretations as well. So that's cool for the decans. And then another is the decans being connected to the tarot. Susan T. Chang has like on her blog, she went through the entirety, like all 36 decans throughout a year and talked about them in connection with the tarot card, and then some of the traditional like astrological associations. So that's a great series to also dive into if you wanted to explore the decans. So yeah, cool.
Totally. Oh yeah, and in my origin story, I totally skipped over the whole tarot part of my journey, but tarot is what I learned first.
Okay,
and I
cool.
learned it in a similar way of really just kind of jumping in, and I kind of just assumed it wasn't that hard, which is funny because I think it gave people some like fairly clunky tarot readings at first, but being able to learn how to read it intuitively, I think gave me a lot of confidence just in knowing how to sit down with someone and talk about their problem, right? And not worry too much about whether I knew, the Kabbalic association with every card or things like that. And so when I was first learning astrology, or like maybe I should say before I actually started seriously learning astrology, I assumed astrology was the same, that you kind of like, I saw the aspect lines. I didn't know what they were. And I just thought, oh yeah, you kind of probably just look at that and just like think like, what vibe is that giving me? And I had a friend even who went to an astrology workshop, and they came back and complained like, oh, it was so intuitive. Like, he just kind of put charts up and asked us like what vibe they gave us. And I wanted to know the rules. And I was like, what are you talking about rules? Why would astrology have rules? Like I would, it wasn't until I really kind of like decided to take the leap that I was like, oh, wow, there is a lot of structure in astrology that can actually support me in like making more specific, detailed, and interesting delineations. And that is what kind of like calmed the rebel inside of me. Usually I don't really like rules, but something about just seeing how they actually could support me in doing cool things with astrology, that's what got me past that hurdle.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess rather than ask the question, it seems like I would say, and correct me and expand on it, your preferred learning style then is to like jump in and kind of get in the practice of it. And at least with your tarot example, you kind of made a foundation of like an intuitive base and then added on the structure as needed, which then kind of helps narrow things down or highlight certain things. Does that sound like it resonates with how you approach? Cool.
Well, and because so many contemporary tarot decks, they come with a book, and the book is almost like part of the deck, right? It's like they assume that when you're sitting down, just you and your friend, you're going to pull a card and then you're going to read the little thing that they've written in the book and talk about that together. And so I think I kind of brought that with me into astrology, that when I was first sitting down with charts, I didn't feel like I needed to have it all in my head. Like if they asked me, oh, what does my North Node in Virgo mean or something like that, I'd be like, let's Google it. Like I was just like, didn't have any pretensions that was like a silly thing to do, because I was curious too. I was like, ooh, what does that mean? Let's find out.
So, okay, yeah, cool. It's almost like a balancing. So you have like the intense mercurial, like Virgo in detail of astrology, like kind of building this structure on the one hand, and then you have a more flexible, I guess it could be several planets. You have like Jupiter and the moon. That's more of the intuitive side. It almost seems like a good pair to, if someone has the capacity to like do a little tarot as they're learning some of the more intense technical sides of astrology, so they're kind of not getting stuck in one side of the brain, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's helped me a little bit. I do that sort of balancing myself with like art or writing, and then sometimes with other divination like tarot. But then I sometimes get drawn into the technicality of the tarot as well. yeah, have you found that like there's sort of a balancing there, or have you kind of seen that in a different way?
For sure, yeah. It's interesting you bring up Mercury and Jupiter, because I think that part of why I have this connection is like I have Mercury in Sagittarius, which is a Jupiter sign that some people that is, known as the detriment of Mercury. And then I have Jupiter in Virgo, a Mercury sign that's known as the detriment of Jupiter, and they're square to each other. And so I kind of have this interesting, like, how at least I see that in how it relates to my learning style is that I can go really, really big picture, and I can also go really, really granular. And as long as I continue the practice of whatever it is, those will kind of balance out in the end. Where it can cause me trouble is if I need to do something really kind of like precise and limited, and like, I don't kind of succeed quite as well in like that what maybe we would say Mercury in Virgo has like this power to be really concise, really effective, really know where the beginning and ending of something is, and be like, there we go, we have created a unit, right? I kind of create goo, a goo of learning around me. I just rub it on me until it soaks in.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, as Mercury typically as a way of looking at like how someone learns. That is an interesting, you kind of that mutual reception with the square and each in their detriment. It is an interesting kind of like back and forth, but I could see it being really like fruitful as well. But yeah, cool. Love to get that detail from you there. Um, awesome. So I guess we have a few different, let's see, few different things I wanted to ask about as well. Maybe there's a few things at the end. Yeah, let's go to more of the organizing and the tools. So like, how do you organize your studies, and what tools do you use? Do you do more of a planning type thing, or do you kind of go wherever spirit takes you?
What do I use? Well, my favorite tool, again, I get to brag about my lovely partner so much in how she's supported me in my learning journey. A more recent birthday, she had made this special astrology board for me. It's like a circular whiteboard that has like a chart on it, with little magnets with the planetary symbols you can stick on there. And something that I think is so fun to do is just like, put the phone and laptop away, go totally analog, and just like open up my ephemeris, right? Which for those who don't know, that's like a big book full of just like numbers where the planets are at every day of the year. And I like to open it up for the day and stick the planets on there and kind of do some quick journaling about what it might mean for my day. And it's very low pressure, right? And so I like being able to do that. Journaling is a huge thing for me. Say, even if I am, say, pulling a horary or something, what a fun way to journal, to kind of do a low pressure horary chart, look at the chart of the moment and just write down like, what do I think this chart wants me to journal about? And so having those kind of personal practices that I can really feel how astrology is positively impacting my life and helping me see more connections between myself and the world around me, helping me feel more confident, like all that stuff, it gets to exist no matter how many people I'm impressing or no matter how many clients I'm getting or whatever, right? Like, so having that foundation of feeling good in the practice is what those really help with. And then I also, I don't know, I love Notion. This is something that I took a little free webinar with Shu Yap one time about solar returns. And she said, I recommend just going through your whole life and make a spreadsheet of every solar return you've ever had and into the future. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's like so much. But I did. I was like, let's make a Notion. Let's make a spreadsheet of all the solar returns I've had, that I ever will have. Let's see what patterns I can see in them. And having like something like that really can, just like help you see connections between things you might not have seen otherwise. That's really fun. And
I
like,
love those. Yeah. Go ahead.
and I guess I'm trying to refine the thread of your question of what tools I use. I mean, I also have like Luna as my software. I think having an astrology software is really helpful because, astro.com can only hold so many charts. But I don't think you need to have the most like schwanky software that can do everything, because also like say AstroSeek, the website, has so many tools on there that if ever I want to expand a chart into having, the monthly revolutions or like something really elaborate, or if I want to rotate the charts so that we can see what would it look like if, the sixth house was rising or something, you can find all of that for free online. You can find planetary hours and days online. And so kind of just having Google be my friend if I'm looking for something specific that I want to run a chart through that, my general software can't.
Cool. Yeah, I noted down the Luna software. I hadn't taken a look at that myself. But yeah, I do everything that I do with free software at this point. And there's nothing I haven't been able to do so far. So yeah, that's good to know. And yeah, I wanted to just briefly repeat some of the practices that you do, because I think those are some really great ideas for kind of being involved in the astrology on a very personal level, of noting down or drawing a chart of the day and doing a bit of journaling, and using the ephemeris. I think is a really great practice to do, just so you're not only looking at like the chart as pre-constructed, but you're kind of able to look at a whole column of where you're able to see the changing over the surrounding days, and not just what's going on in a particular snapshot, because it's a good reminder that the astrology is always changing. And I'd like to also say you don't even need a book ephemeris to do that. You can download an ephemeris from astro.com and probably AstroSeek as well. So you don't really need anything for that either, although a book ephemeris, I do recommend getting one if you can.
Go to the library with some dimes, print out your ephemeris, make it into a little zine.
Yeah, totally. And I have some like taped to the wall over here, like that I just printed out a few pages of ephemeris, so I can like quickly glance over it. So absolutely. And then the timing, going like making a spreadsheet of all your like solar returns of your life, like solar return ascendants, and some like I'm sure some other things that you can add on as you look through things like perfection, annual perfection lords, whatever you're able to do with your current level of learning. I like that as well, because it's like a nice intense session where you're looking at like a sweep of your life, that you can then come back to, maybe look at some different periods as well if you're analyzing different periods of your life. So yeah, I want to try. I've done some versions of those things myself, and it's a good reminder as well to working on my daily practice myself. So yeah, definitely using the ephemeris and looking at the chart of the day. It's great practice. So cool.
And Notion, what the program that I use to make spreadsheets, I find it really helpful for a lot of astrology stuff. Rectification is the other one that I find it really helpful for. Like with some people in my family, I don't know when they're born, and being able to make a spreadsheet where I have, the 12 possible rising signs, and I can kind of just write out, what house would the ruler of this sign be in this rising? I can set it all up, and then I can kind of just tally through and go, how much does that make sense? How much does that make sense? And it really helps me get like a more bird's eye perspective on just like narrowing down, to maybe 3 or 4 rising signs that I really want to take a closer look at for someone. And so, yeah, I'm into spreadsheets. Would recommend.
Agreed. It's a great way to look at the information in a different way versus just trying to make the connections in your head. So totally. Cool. I think you mentioned a few. Are there any other like books or apps or podcasts that you'd like to recommend that you haven't mentioned so far, or that you'd like to mention again just because they're so great?
Yeah. I think that when it comes to podcasts, of course, I listened to a lot of Chris Brennan's astrology podcasts when I was first learning. There's another podcast by someone named Kira Taborn, and her podcast is called The Astrology, one word. And similarly, it just has a lot of great deep dives on, you want to know about eclipses, you want to know about, the third, ninth axis, like what, she'll really have these focused episodes that really hone in on something. And and got to give a shout out to my lovely friend Kyle and Tristan. Their podcast, The Astrology Hotline, is great as well. Actually, when I was first getting into astrology, I sent them a bunch of event charts from my life that they went over on air about my wedding that didn't end up happening, and there was a forest fire, and of course there was a lot of Mars stuff going on in those charts, so that was fun. And books. I mean, huge Demetra George fan. I love her more technical books, like the ancient astrology books. I like her more kind of personable books like Astrology and the Authentic Self. I got the privilege to listen to her speak at NORWAC last year, and I just really got a sense wow, being here in the astrology community at the same time that she is still living and still teaching, wow, what a privilege, right? Because I have a feeling that if I stay in this subject area for, however many more decades, there's going to be younger astrologers in the future who will go, wow, you met Demetra George, right? Definitely, read all of her books because she's a treasure for sure.
Agreed. I'd love to meet her someday myself. Love these recommendations, and I'm excited to check out the Astrology Hotline. I haven't seen it myself, but yeah, cool. Okay, and then do you have any other tips, tricks, or advice that you give to someone who's currently studying astrology? At any level is fine. So if you want to do some beginner ones or even more advanced stuff, please share.
Tips and tricks. Yeah, I mean, I think my main advice is just to write charts down. It really helps slow you down to actually focus on each planet in a sign and house. I don't know about you, but something about just the environment of being online, looking at a chart, there's all these options. I get clicky, right? I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna check out the ZR period, and I'm gonna add the bounds, and I'm gonna tab over to this other tab and look at, and I start grafting all this stuff onto the chart. Whereas if I actually take the time to draw a circle, draw the ascendant descendant line, right? And I'll write down the little glyph of the ascendant, and I'll go, Taurus rising, right? It really helps you think about each one as you're putting it down. And I think it's why writers often, and a writing advice I've heard is to write by hand with a pen. If you're stuck, right? If you're staring at the blank screen on your laptop trying to write, just pick up a pen and paper and write, because there's something about the deliberateness of putting it down on paper that can really focus your attention.
Yeah, I'm such a nerd because what you're saying, I'm getting so excited about because these are some of the things that I found that have helped me a lot, and kind of thinking about how other people using these same kind of techniques and really digging into it is really exciting. Because writing things down and writing by hand has really helped me. I have a whole clipboard that I carry around where I'm just writing out stuff instead of just thinking about it or typing. I really love that advice of writing the chart down, almost grounding the astrology in the physicality of the moment and letting it be a full experience, I guess, with all the senses, instead of just the brain running full speed. Really love that. So yeah, thanks for that. Great advice.
Yeah, and good luck to everyone who's wanting to learn astrology. It's so fun. And I guess my other advice is just try not to be intimidated by the breadth of how much there is out there, because not everyone needs to learn 5 million techniques for astrology to be useful in your everyday life. A lot of what you actually sit down with someone in a reading, it's really honing in on the details. If you can really learn how to go deep on something, really talk to someone about what their moon sign means, don't let the like beginner's high, make you start judging that as being like super basic, simple or whatever. Because like the truth is that when you talk to astrologers who have been doing astrology for decades, that's what they like focus on most. They go, ah, yes, ah, yes, Mars in Capricorn. Let's talk about that, right? Like there's this almost like circling back to where we started, where you can really focus on just like those few things that can make a difference in your life and how you understand yourself. Like even at the beginning, I talked about how I'm a Cancer rising. I have the moon in Libra. And when I really just say the most basic things like would I say my life direction is toward that of care? Would I say that fairness is important to me? Like it's like, yeah, those are like, that's my jam. That, those really basic delineations, you can go so far into learning about someone's worldview and their values. And of course, the really specific environmental things as well, like, oh, my mom's an artist. There you go, moon in Libra, right? Like that, you can go so many places with just one thing. So don't be embarrassed. That's my advice.
Great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I don't have anything to add. That's great as it is. Awesome. Okay, and then I have my last like main question, something a bit different, but I like to add on just to have a bit of envisioning. Just a lot of times I feel like we're kind of responding to things that are going on in the moment or like the latest talking point. But it's nice to also kind of like look ahead with like a positivity in mind. Like, so the question is, like, what's one kind of positive vision that you have for the future of our astrology, of our astrological tradition?
The future of astrology. Yeah, I think that something that I would love to see is people really finding more unique and interesting ways to be creating kind of like fruitful edges with other subject areas, right? I think that, something that has happened in the astrology community lately, and I would say I'm probably part of this as well, is there's this huge influx of new practitioners and people who've become interested in, the last little while. And I think that something that we can really do is like remember that we don't have to be creating only kind of like derivative things. We don't have to be kind of like focusing on, okay, well, if I synthesize this source and this source, I get this delineation. And that's awesome. This is, it's fun to nerd out about that stuff. But I think remembering that like even those people that we really respect, they're always improvising. Like I mentioned with the zodiacal releasing course, when I read Balance and what he wrote on zodiacal releasing, and then I took Chris Brennan's course, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much of this stuff, the culmination period, the preview period, only looking at squares instead of trines, all the stuff that Chris Brennan did. That's because he was really putting it into practice and seeing what spoke to him, right? And we all have the opportunity to do that. And so I'd love to see astrologers be not afraid. Be not afraid of getting curious and seeing, what happens when you allow yourself to follow the thread, and what kind of unique thing that we can all add to the subject.
Cool. Yeah, that's totally agree. And I think Saturn in Pisces is a great time for that as well. Getting like deeply and specifically like creative about like, yeah, kind of pushing the edges of astrology in like rich ways. Yeah, I love that. Awesome.
It's tomorrow. It's the last
Yeah.
day of Saturn in Aquarius today.
Cool. Also, is there anything you wanted to add about learning astrology that you thought of and didn't get to fit in?
Well, Tony, I guess I just want to add like astrology is so cool. It's just so fun and so cool. And I'm so happy to be part of, this community, both as like a hobby and as a practitioner. And yeah, and maybe like reminding people too that like get out there in your local community and see what's going on. That's another way we can kind of like get around elitism or whatever those things that might start, gnawing at the sides of our brain, thinking that, oh, well, this, that, and the other person says. It's like, well, find the like elderly lady who's been doing astrology readings in your city since like the 70s and talk to her, and she's going to have some kooky ideas. And that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And like, see if there are people in your city who want to, start a little group at a cafe and meet up and chat transits. Yeah, see how you can ground it where you are, because that's another thing that I think can create a diversity in the field, is that if we're actually looking at our, the charts of our own country, I don't live in the United States, charts of your own province, your own city, like, that's so interesting. If you want to get into mundane astrology, but you find it intimidating to make predictions about like, Palestine-Israel conflict, like, of course you do, right? That's not your like generally like local environment, unless you live there. Go ahead. Like, I'm very curious what you have to say. But for me, it's like, look at municipal politics. It's lower pressure. It's a fun way to chat about the people in your community that they'll actually care. Whereas, if I'm talking, oh my gosh, the MLA of my area said this thing, maybe people on Twitter wouldn't care, but my local astrology group would. And there's a lot of people out there who want to have the conversation.
Cool. Love that. Awesome. Yeah, take that advice myself. Cool. So I guess as we wrap up, is there anything you would like to share about yourself and what you have coming up, offerings that you have, and so forth?
Sure. Something new that I am starting this month, which I'm really excited about, is facilitating death cafes. This is not really about astrology, although people are welcome to share anything they want. I'm doing them both virtual and eventually in person in my area, but it's just like kind of a safe space to get together with people, talk about death and end of life in like a totally no agenda way, right? I'm not trying to get you to believe anything or plan anything or whatever. Just like a place to talk about a taboo topic. So if people are interested in attending those, you can get in touch. And for astrology, my books are open. I'm booking for this month and next. That's going to change in May when I go to grad school. But so get me while you can, especially if you want me to take a look at romance or synastry or polyamory or queerness in your chart. I love those things. But honestly, some of the most fun conversations I've had too are people who are like starting a business or, wanting to learn about their kids' astrology. There's just so much fun stuff that we can do. And so definitely get in touch. I'm very friendly.
Awesome. Yeah, highly recommend getting reading with Milo. And yeah, I'll put the links in the notes so people can go over to your books and fill them up before May hits. For sure. And I definitely like to have you back on for some more specific discussion on the romance synastry, polyamorous synastry, which sounds fascinating. We'll have to like do a deep dive on that sometime.
Sure. Yeah, I love to.
Awesome.
Oh, and thank you for asking me so many questions about myself and my thoughts on the world, because that's my favorite thing.
Yeah,
I get to spend an hour telling people what to do. Amazing.
No, I've learned a lot, and it was some great food for thought and some great resources. So yeah, thanks for coming on and being guest number 2. Thanks. Have a good one, Milo.
Bye.
Bye.